All right. Good day, everybody. It's James Leichter from Aptora. This is another internal webinar software training for the staff of Aptora and the staff of RA Tax and Accounting. We started posting these to the internet so that our clients could start benefiting from this training as well. I will quickly just recap what we do here. Every week we have a webinar. And I do these webinars myself because they're important, and they're for internal company training. There are some people that have to come and others don't. Sales and support must be here. It's required. We actually have plenty of others show up that don't have to be here, which is terrific, like developers and others. But this internal training is done every week and made available for our end users, and I hope the end users don't mind. It's not a Hollywood production. If I mess something up, I'm not going to go back and edit it. We're not going to add anything fancy. We're just going to put a start and a finish screen on it and put it on YouTube and say, there it is. So that's the idea behind us posting these. We have had a lot of conversations about inventory control, which is the basis of good accounting, really. The basis of good accounting is to understand your chart of accounts, and I mean fully understand it, and fully understand the idea behind a department list. And once you understand those, you start setting up what we call invoice items. We call them that because it's anything that can show up on an invoice for sale and a discount, subtotals, etc. So the next step, the third step, is to understand thoroughly the difference between these item types and how they affect your financials, which means how do they affect job costing and so forth? How do they affect your reports? What effect do they have on accounting? What does the accounting tab do, especially with these three accounts? We've talked a lot about that. Most of us are familiar with it. If you're not, that's important homework to get caught up on these three things. Today, we're going to talk about some of the minor but important aspects of inventory management. And we're going to start with preferences items. As we probably know, my preferences is yours as the user you're logged in as, and I'm logged in as Ashley Adams. That is her preference. She only has one in this particular case. Many times, there's a lot more preferences. Company preferences apply to everybody, and you have to have permission to get here. These are your default selections when you create inventory and you're creating a lot of them. You know, you could be in here creating a lot of items. It is very helpful to have default selections. You'll notice some things are already selected for me. That's because I have set up defaults. The item alias feature is for another video. We've covered it, but that's in another video if you're interested in that, and you can also go to our support site. The item alias feature is turned on here, and you have an option to use vendor-specific pricing also. So not only can you put in a item alias, that's an alternative part number for an alias, a vendor you buy it from, but you can also put in their specific prices. And when you create a PO for that vendor, it will use their specific prices, not the price you would normally pay. Use inventory by employee feature. What that does, and if you hover over it, it kind of tells you what it's going to do before I even tell you, right? What that does is that allows you to track inventory by employee more easily. It does many things, one of which is when I log in as Ashley Adams, it's going to default to pardon me, not my department, almost a department. When I log in as Ashley Adams, it's going to use her warehouse, the warehouse that was assigned to her, if I have the warehouse assignment by user feature turned on as well. So use inventory by employee means we're going to allow inventory to be tracked by employee The warehouse assignment means that we can assign warehouses to users, to employees. That could be people using mobile, people in Tom, any employee. And you'll see some of that in a minute. Use the item assembly feature. This feature allows you to assemble multiple items into one. And what makes it unique is when you assemble items, you relieve inventory of the assembly, the bill of materials, as we call it, and you actually create an item from scratch. So you could create an item called gas furnace installation kit. And within that item, you could have 10 inventory items. And you would actually relieve inventory of those 10 items and create a new one called kit. Another way to look at it is you could build computers. That could be your job. And you could have in inventory the components inside the box, that computer box, such as a hard drive, RAM, motherboard. And when you hit a button, all of those items disappear from inventory and a new one is created called a computer. So that's the assembly feature. Most of our users don't use that, but it's there for those who do. Item reservation allows you to actually reserve items for a job. In the old days, we used to take a piece of paper and write, "James sold this, don't touch it," and tape it to the box. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. What this does is it electronically reserves that item. It will not be available for anyone else to pick it unless they're picking it for the job it was reserved for. And we've done videos on that. Use labor minutes. That displays a field called labor minutes and allows you to put in labor minutes at a component level, an item level. So all of your items can have labor minutes. A motor, residential fan motor, could have 60 minutes. And that's FYI, for your information. That way you look at it and say, oh, this will take 60 minutes. But if you start adding those items to a group item, so you're building yourself a group item, those minutes will start totaling up. And when you create an estimate, those labor minutes will total up on the estimate, giving you a better idea of how long that job is going to take from a labor hour perspective. Finally, enable unit of measure. That comes disabled. Many of these features come disabled just to make it easier to deal with the software in the beginning. When you enable unit of measure, it allows you to buy, for example, a roll of wire. One item would be 250 feet, but you can then sell it by the foot. So it would put 250 units into inventory that you could sell to people, but you bought one. So you buy one of them, one roll of wire, and all of a sudden you got 250 in stock, but it's not 250 rolls. It would be 250 1-foot sections of wire. That's what you chose. You could imagine a 10-foot piece of pipe. One unit is 10 feet. It puts 10 1-foot sections into stock, or 5 2-foot sections, etc. What we're going to do today is talk about a few of these in more detail, but that's where we turn them on. Let's close this. Actually, let's go to Window, in case you didn't know about it. Hit Close All. Under Company, we have Inventory Adjustment and various tools under here. We have Price Level List above, Inventory Markup. These are two ways to mark things up. In fact, it's two broad ways. There's lots of things you can do under each. Unit of measure, as we discussed, is here. You wouldn't see it if we hadn't turned it on. Update retail price, that's a utility to update the retail price of all of your items. Your cost of goods sold, the price you pay for that item, changes as you do your bookkeeping, but the retail price doesn't. You have to tell the software, I want you to update my retail pricing. And we've covered that in other videos. And we have the assembly list. And that was the item assembly feature we talked about. We're going to focus on what is under here, inventory adjustment. When you have certain preferences on or off, you may not see this first option. People often ask about that. Why is my inventory review adjustment disabled? It would be because you don't have the warehouse assignment by user feature turned on. Let me make sure I'm right. Yeah, okay. See, sometimes I doubt myself. There's so much in this software. There's reasons for that. It just doesn't apply. When you have that feature turned on, this feature does not apply. Well, let's open that up and see what it does. This is one way for you to adjust inventory on hand. You can see that it lists for you a part number on the left-hand side, the description, and the warehouse. It'll show you how many you have total. It'll show the reserved quantity. Remember the item reservation feature? It would show you if you had any on reserve. And then finally, how many are available. So it would be this minus this equals this. And then you have a chance to type in a new quantity. So you might have done inventory and noticed that the software thinks you have -1, but in fact, you actually have 1. So you went to the main warehouse and saw that you have 1. You may not know how that happened yet, but you want to fix it. You would just type in 1. And if you checked this location, truck 1, and they had 2 of them, then you would type in 2. And you would just continue. And it shows you the quantity difference. So it's adding 2 to inventory. You have -1, and we're telling it has 1. We're not telling it to add 1. We're telling it I have 1. We did it that way to make it more simple. You just simply tell the software, how many do you have? I have 1. And it says, okay, well, I have to add 2. I got to add 1 to get you to 0 and 1 more. And there's a value to this, right? This is $189.80 that have to go somewhere. And right here, that's $284.70 that has to go somewhere. That's going to increase the inventory on your balance sheet. That's going to debit inventory on your balance sheet. Has to go somewhere. And you would just continue. And you have tools up here to filter. You can search, sort, things like that. Now, for some users, this is not easy to use because they have so many inventory items. They can search for an item, but you can't search for like 4 items at once. You can also search a particular warehouse and then look for an item. And there it is. You could also pick a department, and you could pick a job, and then you can pick an adjustment account, like shrinkage and spoilage is the default in preferences. What that's about to do is it's about to take that money right here, and it's going to put it in the adjustment account. It's going to change that account. Now, in this case, it's going to be called an expense, but this is going to make that expense go up. So we're going to increase that expense here. And we also could job cost it. So we could affect our income statement, or we could affect the balance sheet. Depends on what we pick for the adjustment account. And we could even job cost it. Now, why would anyone ever job cost it? I get that asked a lot. Probably not very often, but let's say we took that 250-foot roll of wire to this job and it disappeared. Happens all the time. It disappeared. So you might say, look, I'm job costing that. That's the job. The job's going to have to pay for that. So we do have the option of job costing it. And as we've seen elsewhere in the software, most of the time when you're dealing with money, you have the ability to departmentalize that money. You can attribute that money to a certain department. This wouldn't be a good choice. It'd probably be commercial design build, for example, or a commercial replacement. So that allows us to job cost this money. And this allows us to decide where that money goes, what's affected by this money, because we have to do something with this money. That's good accounting because this item has a value. When we're done, we just hit save and close. And let's see, selected will be applied. Okay, just letting us know. Yeah, has been made. Thank you. So this is telling us where to go find them. You may view these adjustments in the regular inventory adjustment list. Click Company, Inventory Adjustment, Non-Serialized Items. Well, I'm glad it told me that because that's where I'm going next. Anyway, back to Company, Inventory Adjustment, Non-Serialized. That's what it just referred to. This is a list of all the adjustments that we have been making to inventory over the course of forever, except for serialized. That's a different form. And if you want to see any of them, you would just go to it and double click to open it. You will notice there are some fields that are disabled, as we call it. Some people say dimmed out. It's disabled. That's fine. Call it what you want. It's disabled. We don't want you coming in here and making certain changes to this for accounting reasons. But we do let you come back and change things that you might have forgot. You forgot to pick a department. You forgot to pick the customer. You wish you'd picked a different account. The boss said you better start putting in memos. Or even the unit price. You can change that. Or change the value. That would probably be enabled if we had done not a quantity change, but a value change. So certain things can be changed. Here's what happened down here. And we also have a bit of a recap. Item info after the adjustment. Total quantity on hand, it's 9 now. Average cost per item, $10. Total item value, $90. We know who did it right there. And that's that. We can save our changes if we made any. And there they are. Now, you could right-click and do New Adjustment. You can delete an adjustment if you have permission. You might find that the adjustment was incorrect. Maybe you can't edit certain elements of it. You might delete it and start over. You might want to open this in Excel because there may not be a report for this. We do have well over 400 reports, but there may not be a report that meets your needs. So you could put this into Excel. There's a quick report, but that may not be adequate. Maybe it is, but Excel might be your answer. You also have the ability, by the way, we're not going to get into the details, but just so you know, you do have the ability to import a lot of things in the software, including item adjustments. You can actually import a whole list of inventory items, invoice items, with new quantities on hand. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. So that's how you would adjust non-inventory items. Do a new one real quick. Pick a date. The date's important because that's the date that will affect your financial reports, all your reports for that matter. So where do you want this money change to apply? Pick the date. That's important. Do you want to adjust the quantity on hand or the value? Quantity on hand, you might be ready for that. You probably understand that completely. The software thinks I have 5, I actually have 10. But maybe you want to change the value of an item. Let's have a look at that. So I'll go down and find an item. And you know what? I'll find an item that's got more history. So here's an item. And the unit price right now is $7 and a penny. And looking at all of the items that I have on hand, their value is $5,712.85. I don't believe it. I don't think it's worth that much. I think it's worth $4,448.01. And how did I come up with that? I just made it up. But if you think it has a different value, you can change it right here. And the software will then change the unit price, which will change all of your financials, your income statement, balance sheet. It could potentially have giant effects on your financials, but you can do it. Why would you ever do that? Well, because you might have in inventory gold watches. And gold has been going up a lot lately, so all of your watches are worth more. You might have bars of gold. But what's a more practical example for contractors? A jug of refrigerant, like R22 refrigerant. It goes up in value because it's not being manufactured anymore. And certain things go down in value. So you can make adjustments if you want to. This is something you want to be very careful with. You want to be sure that you know what you're doing. If you are a full charge bookkeeper or an accountant, then you probably know what you're doing. But the average user shouldn't go in here and mess with this. So you can change the quantity on hand by just typing in new numbers right here, or change the value by typing in something here. You could job cost it. Well, no, you can't. I take that back. You can't job cost this. Job cost the quantity on hand. Some account's going to be affected. What account? So we have to pick that account. Now, if you call tech support and say, what account do I pick? They shouldn't help you. They shouldn't answer that. It's not that they don't want to. It's maybe not even that they can't. It's just that they don't know the right answer for you. You might not appreciate it, but there's more than one right answer. And if they tell you which one to pick, they own it. And if it's wrong, they own it. It's their fault. So tech support people, don't answer that question. What you could say is people sometimes pick a shrinkage account, which is expense. Sometimes people pick an asset account called inventory. Just depends on what you're trying to do. But for sure, put in a memo. Put in a memo so we can go find it if we need to find it. And when we do find it, it'd be nice to know why you did such a thing. What was your thinking behind that? That covers this list. If we click up here, we can see the same things as if we right-clicked. So we'll close that. Back to company, inventory adjustment, serialized items. This is where you manage your serialized items. As we all know, we have serialized item type here. It performs, from an accounting perspective, it performs identically to an inventory part, except it does require you to enter a serial number. You have to put in a serial number when you buy it, and you eventually need to have a serial number in when you sell it. Let's take a look at a new one. First thing you do is pick a date. We want to know, what date do I want to change my financials? And then we pick an item. The item has to be in here. And maybe it's a water heater. There's one. And a department, I can associate a department with it. Typically, you do not need to pick a department. You do need to pick an account. There's that question again. Do I pick an expense account or an inventory account? Is this an asset or an expense? Well, it depends. Just depends on what you're trying to do. But what you can do here is you can type in a serial number right there. Pick a place to put it, like van 3. You know, we try to keep a water heater on every van. And right now, that van number 3, has a water heater on it. There's the model number of the water heater, and there's the serial number. We went out and got the serial number just now. Now, how it got on there, I don't know. I'm not even sure. I mean, our system doesn't even show this water heater in stock. I don't really know at this moment where we bought it. But it's on van 3, and we discovered it was not in the system. Now, that water heater could be sold, and the technician couldn't find the serial number. So we might be backdating this and putting the unit in so he can sell it. We want to definitely type in a memo explaining the story. We just found this. It was on his truck, and none of us know why it wasn't in stock. And does a water heater have a value? This is another question for an accountant. Tech support really shouldn't try to answer this either. You might think, well, what's tech support do for a living? Just sit around and say, I can't tell you? It's just that they can explain what this value field will do. It's going to affect this account you picked. Oh, yeah, the account you told me you couldn't help me pick? Yeah, that one. But these have accounting ramifications, and that's why we try not to get into it. Our trainers will, because trainers are consultants. But this is the value, and you may not want a value in here because you're going to create a cost of goods sold out of thin air. So you may not want to put in a value of that water heater. But then you might say, well, I have a job costing report. I want the job costing report to show that that water heater costs money because it did. Okay, then put in a value. But that'll also create a cost of goods sold, and maybe that's right. Maybe that's what you want to do. Also, until you sell it, it's going to create an asset, and that'll show up on your inventory on the balance sheet. So if we put a value in of 444, then we are going to add $444 to our balance sheet. So we need to pick the correct account in that case, and that's going to be an asset account, other current asset inventory. Otherwise, this may not do what we're expecting it to do right there. So that's how you would add a serial number out of thin air. And you could continue as long as the date is going to be the same. You could continue to add other serial numbers for the same item. If you need to do another item, then you might do save and new and continue to adjust. And that allows you to enter serial numbers out of thin air. How do they normally get in here, you might ask? Most of you probably know. But serial numbers are added when you receive the items. So when you take physical possession of the items, and you do that through several different forms, receive items is the most common. That's when you take possession of this water heater right there, that model. And it'll ask you for the serial numbers of every one of them that you're taking possession of. That's normally how they get on there. This allows you to fix inventory issues. Save and close. Right click, you could adjust a serial number. So what this allows you to do is pick an item, such as the water heater, pick the serial number that you're dealing with, and put it in a new warehouse. So that way you can adjust the serialized items, put them in a new warehouse. You also can do a lookup. If you have a lot of serial numbers, you can start typing in the number if you prefer. But that allows you to move the serial number from one place to the other. Now, remember, each serial number is a separate item. That's why we don't do it here. Review, adjust, that form, because those deal with the item number only. The unique thing about a serialized item is it's one item number, usually a model number, but there's many of them, so they could be all over the place. This allows you to go find all of them and start putting them in different places. That allows you to move them around. I'll give this a date in case I want to go find that later. Save and close. Each entry must have at least one new warehouse or be selected to remove. So one option here is to remove the item. So I could remove the item. In fact, let's look at that again. Each entry must at least have a new warehouse or be selected to remove. So where did I make my mistake? New warehouse, or pardon me, main warehouse, main warehouse. I can't move it to itself. So it should be happy there. I'm glad that message popped up because I almost forgot to mention the remove. I could have simply picked a serial number and checked the boxes to get rid of it. And optionally, I could have put a value in. So if I were getting rid of these, I could put a value in, and that's what would affect my financials. So let's do save and close, and let's do another adjustment. Let's pick an item. I don't have any. Don't have any. I know I got lots of these. Okay. All right, so let's take this guy here, and it is in the main warehouse because it says so, but we don't have it. We cannot find it. We cannot find that serial number anywhere. Now, the best thing to do really is to go find the invoice. There must have been an invoice somewhere where you sold it and forgot to put it on the invoice. Go find the invoice, or maybe you sold the wrong serial number. So ideally, we would go find the invoice or create an invoice if we know where it went. Maybe we forgot to charge them, and maybe we'll never get paid. It's too old. Create the invoice and discount it down to 0. But the best thing to do is to go fix an invoice or make an invoice. But let's say you cannot find where it went. You have no idea where it went. It probably did not go to a job. Then the proper account might be called shrinkage and spoilage. It might have been theft, but we typically don't put that word on the income statement. So we're going to be getting rid of this, and its value is $383.24. That's what we paid for it. So when I hit save and close, I'm going to fix this date here, 0302. Got my date wrong. So when I hit save and close, I'm going to be increasing the shrinkage and spoilage account, an expense account, on my income statement. And I need to memo it. I got to explain why we did this. Now, obviously, this is important, so we don't let people have permission to do things like this. Otherwise, I can get rid of a really nice plumbing fixture or garbage disposal or water heater and take it home. Especially if I have somebody, a boyfriend or a girlfriend in the company, I just tell him or her, go do a serialized adjustment for me and backdate it, and I'll take it home and put it in our house your house, your mom's house. So we don't really want too many people to have permission to do things like this. Hit save and close. Also, you don't want people to have permission to do these things if they really don't know what they're doing, because they can quickly mess things up and the boss may never even know it. He or she will be reading their reports and think that the report is accurate when it is not accurate. Now, if you mess up one of these, you can delete it. You can void it, actually. We don't let you delete it because we want a record that it once existed. So we do let you void it, and that will unwind what it did. Also, everything that you do is in the audit trail. So the audit trail is going to be keeping track of everything that's going on. And if you suspect a problem, you might go to the audit trail and look into it. In fact, let's do that. Let's look at one of the transactions that I created, shrinkage and spoilage right here. And that was 1 Papa Zebra 7. So I didn't find it there. Form, adjustment, ADJ, that might be enough. Inventory adjustment, there it is. So that way we find the form called inventory adjustment, and we'll be able to see who made those adjustments. And over here, you might find details that are helpful to help you sort it out, figure out who did what, why, how it happened. All right, let's go to Window, Close All. Back up to Company. That took care of the serialized items. Here we have a serial number list. This is a list of all of the serial numbers in your system, regardless of the item. If you double click on it, then you'll see the serial number history for that item. You will see sold, purchased, other, those are other transactions, and adjustments. So everything has history, as you probably know if you're a user, but you may not have known about this one. This allows you to go see the history of your serial numbers. If you right click, you've got a few options: view the history, add a serial number, adjust a serial number. That's what we saw earlier. But this is a nice place to be able to go do a search for a serial number when you don't know anything else. You could search for the serial number, like that water heater that just showed up somehow. We talked about it earlier. You probably would go here and you would search for the water heater. And if it finds it, you'd go to history to figure out what happened. And you might discover that you sold it to the wrong person, you forgot to put it on an invoice, etc. Really, doing these adjustments is your last choice. If you find yourself doing a lot of adjustments, you're doing something wrong on the bookkeeping side of things, because you shouldn't be in here very often. I'm going to skip inventory replenishment for a moment. We've done a whole video on it. Item reservation, we've done a video on it, but this is your reserved items. When you enter a bill, certain other forms, receive items, with this feature turned on, you'll see a receive items button. It will open up and allow you to select what items you want to reserve. You can come here and double click to see it. This has been reserved for Jimmy Johnson. And again, that's just setting it aside so that it doesn't appear in the quantity on hand. When you go to sell something and you go to the warehouse selector, it will not be available for you to buy it, or pardon me, to sell it, unless it's the customer it's on reserve for. It will not be in here otherwise. So it simply lets you electronically set aside an item so that you're sure to get it to the right job. Now that can be important because you might want very specific items, serialized items, for example, to go to a certain job. You don't want to mix those with other jobs. You might have bought 10 furnaces, 10 condensing units, 10 coils, and you want those exact 30 items to go to a certain job. You would want to reserve them. Also, when you reserve them for a job, it makes it easy to put them on the invoice because the invoice knows that it has reserved items and it will tell you that and show them to you. And you just click a button and there they are. So that would be a place where you can go look at items that are on reserve. And why would you do that? Again, most of these features here are to fix things. So you might have noticed that you have something on reserve and have no idea why. And you want to sell it today, and you have no idea why it's on reserve. Who put this on reserve? I have no idea. Well, you could go in here and find out. You'd see everything that's on reserve, and you'd see who reserved it right there. And if you don't need it on reserve, then you can get rid of their reservation. You can either adjust the reservation if you want to keep part of it, or you could delete the reservation. Back up to company. Inventory transfer. I'm going to skip that for a minute. I'm going to go to warehouse assignment by user. This feature, we turned it on in preferences. This allows you to pick a user, such as Ashley Adams, anybody in your company, as long as they're set up as an employee and a user, right here. You'll find them in this list. And you can assign from the available warehouses, right here, you can assign what warehouses they can deal with. She can deal with all of them. But James Donut, maybe not. So we would then get rid of his and go find his truck and put that there, and only he can deal with truck 1. So if he logs into Total Office Manager, he can only buy into truck 1, or pardon me, he can only sell from truck 1. If he goes to create an invoice, he can only sell from truck 1. And he can only deal with truck 1. Most of the software gets locked down unless it's truck 1. But the main idea behind it was don't let him mess around with truck 1, especially invoicing. Or pardon me, let him deal with truck 1. Don't let him mess around with any of the others, especially invoicing. And it also defaults to truck 1, so it's convenient. When he goes to create an invoice, it will automatically default to that department. So that way you have the ability to decide who can control what warehouses. Where do the warehouses come from? Under lists, you'll find your warehouse list here. You give it a name and identify what type it is. Is it a warehouse, storefront, vehicle, other? You have the ability to associate the warehouse with the employee, which you would want to do, right? You would want to put in all of your vehicles and all of those drivers, everybody that manages that vehicle. And if the person changes, you'd come here and change that person. And then you can fill out the rest of this information if you need to. Most of this doesn't really apply to a vehicle, but we left it there in case somebody wanted to use it for something. It isn't necessarily needed. What's really important is give it a name, the type, and the employee. And now the software understands when we're talking about truck 1, we're talking about Ashley. When we're talking about Ashley's warehouse, we're talking about truck 1. And I can come in and remove her. So that's where we set up our warehouses. Now, in the case of a warehouse that belongs to a vehicle, there's another thing that we should know. If you come down to your asset manager, and you look at your vehicles, service truck 1, for example, you have the ability to associate this asset, this truck, with the warehouse. That might seem confusing at first. We were dealing with a warehouse, which is truck 1, and we did identify it as a vehicle, but the software doesn't know what actual vehicle you have in your possession that it belongs to. That's not what we were setting up. We were setting up a place where we told the software, consider this place a warehouse, and I want to be able to add and remove inventory from that warehouse, that location. And in this case, it was called truck number 1, but it doesn't really understand that it's truck 1. It just knows that it's a vehicle type. You can find all of your warehouses in here. So this would allow you, this asset manager allows you to put in all of your company's assets, including vehicles, and you can optionally assign this asset to a warehouse. So now the software understands when you're talking about service truck number 1, a vehicle, you also mean that it is actually a warehouse as well, called truck number 1. Now it understands that. That may seem like some extra steps, but that gives the software the maximum flexibility, and you're only dealing with it once in a while. Go back to company, inventory adjustment, inventory replenishment, which we skipped. This shows you a list of all the items that have dropped below their reorder point, and it allows you to quickly create purchase orders for those. We're not going to go into it any further, though, because there's a whole video on it, and I don't want to replace that video. But I wanted to make sure we pointed it out. You have quite a bit of options here on how to create your POs, but it just gives you the ability to quickly make purchase orders to get everything back to stock. Our theory of doing things is you're not restocking each vehicle, each warehouse with this. You're restocking your main warehouse, which then restocks each of your other warehouses, the vehicles. So what you want to do is you want to have a main warehouse that can restock, replenish your vehicles on a regular basis. And then as the main warehouse reorder points fall below where they're supposed to be, you would then replenish the main warehouse. So a truck's reorder point is reached, you replenish it from your main warehouse. When the main warehouse reorder point is reached, you replenish it from your vendors. If you're interested in using that feature, there's a good video on that and a good help topic. Finally, we're going to finish with inventory transfer. This is another transfer form. You probably think I've seen enough of those. But inventory transfer is something that is really important, and you need different ways to do it. This inventory transfer form is actually multifunctional. It can do 3 things. It can transfer inventory from one warehouse to another. And we've seen that earlier, where you would go pick an inventory part and you would select a warehouse that it's located in and a warehouse that you want to put it in. And you could just repeat. When you come in here, you are only going to see inventory parts. Because remember, a non-inventory part is a part that you don't have. Because you called it a non-inventory part, so you don't have it. You might say, yeah, I do. I'm looking at 3 of them. But if it's an inventory part, it has the potential to be in stock. A non-inventory part is never in stock, so you will not find those here. So this form gives you the ability to quickly move things from one place to another, well, like you've seen elsewhere, but this allows for rapid movement. Another thing that it can do is transfer ownership. So we'll pick a date that's going to be affected, 04/04/2020. And what I can do is pick a job. Actually, I wanted to pick Boardwalk. And I can associate that with a department, such as commercial replacement. And I certainly want to put in a memo. And autofill from what warehouse? I'll say main warehouse. And now I want to go pick items that I have on hand. And it's hard to know what I have on hand, isn't it? But you would probably be using a barcode scanner. You'd be scanning from a bill of materials or something like that. Or you can use the lookup feature. And then we can say, show me the main warehouse, inventory part. I only want to see items that are on hand. And then you can move some over, like I'm doing here. Or I can pick a whole range and move it over. Click OK. Now, what is this thing about to do? Maybe I'll get rid of one. It is about to remove this inventory from the main warehouse and change its ownership to Boardwalk without an invoice. And when it does that, no invoice is created. But what it will do is it will relieve inventory. So we're going to credit the inventory account. And it's going to debit your COGS account, cost of goods sold account, for this job. So whatever this stuff cost, you're going to create job costing entries. You're going to create costs of goods sold on your income statement. Why would you ever want to do
Am I the only one that can't hear him?
You're creating costs of goods sold.
Hey, James, you broke out there.
Okay. Am I back?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. So for the viewers, this is one of those non-Hollywood moments that we won't go in and fix. All right. So what I was saying is you might have a job that's going on for many months and you want to progressively create costs of goods sold. You're already doing that when you enter a timesheet. As long as you're picking that job, you're creating costs of goods sold. So you might want to create costs of goods sold as you go. Now, one thing that's neat about this is, let's just do it. Let's do save and new. So we just created costs of goods sold and we relieved inventory. Now I'll put in another date, 05/05/2020. And the job name is the same. That's important. We have to make sure that we have that same job, Boardwalk. Transfer of ownership. Let's go to return inventory. What warehouse or what warehouse are we putting it into? I want to put it in my main warehouse. And then let's go pick something. A common phone call to tech support is, I found a bug. You're only showing me a small number of inventory parts, and I know I've got 1,000 on my list. Well, if you think about it, it's only showing you what's available to be returned. So picture yourself up at Walmart wanting to return an item. May I see your receipt? The system knows, or give me your credit card. The system knows what you bought. So it's only going to give you a chance to return what you've already bought. This is great for job costing because you might have taken 1,000 different things out to that job, and eventually you're going to return some of those things. You want to return those back to stock. You want to return your inventory number back to what it should be. You want to get the cost of goods sold off your income statement because it's now back in your possession, and you want to go adjust the job costing report so that it reflects the fact that you didn't need these 4 things. You decide what date you want this to happen on. Usually that's today, or the day it came back. It might be the day you want it to be affected, which could be a payroll day because it affects job commissions. But when you hit save and close, you've returned the inventory. That is a very advanced feature that you don't find in very many programs. Okay,